Hey everyone, welcome to Midlife Matters. I'm Marie, and each week I'm joined by my friends Julie and Mindy to talk about all the topics keeping women in the middle years up at night. Today we're talking about regret-proofing your life with Suzy Rosenstein. Suzy is a mastered certified life coach who encourages women to identify what they want and take the steps needed to make it happen. We've been inspired by Suzy and can't wait to share her enthusiasm with you. Let's get started. Hey, Julie.
Hey, Marie.
Hi, Mindy.
Hey, Marie. Hey, Julie.
Listeners, today we're joined by a very special guest, Suzy Rosenstein, a life coach and the host of the Women in the Middle podcast. Suzy, welcome to Midlife Matters.
Hello, I'm thrilled to be here. Thanks so much for inviting me.
Yes, we're so happy to have you. Suzy, I just gave the bare minimum about you, but I know there's so much more. So would you mind telling our listeners a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. First of all, I love being with all of you. I have never done an interview with more than two people. So this is really, really fun.
It's super fun.
It totally is. So, I work by myself. So this is like party time.
It is.
I know.
Okay, so this is my second career as a life coach. My story really is that I was, working away for 27 years, 19 years in the same place. I was in a publishing department, and I had started to notice that I wasn't happy for about 5 years. 5 years.
That's a long time.
It sure is. And then, I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do, and I was very confused. And then one day I got that fateful knock at the door, and I received a layoff notice.
Oh, wow.
And then my hand was pushed, right? And so that was the best gift ever. It's exactly what I needed. And I had identified that what I was missing in my career was working one-on-one with people. I had always done cause-oriented work, but I had never worked one-on-one. I had already kind of identified that, and then I hired a life coach somewhere in that first 6 months of being laid off. And basically my head exploded.
Oh, wow.
And I realized I didn't even know anything about life coaching. And I just realized and lived with really huge insights that were pretty quick. And so after that all happened, I thought, well, maybe I should check that out as a career, because it is working one-on-one with people. And that's what happened to me.
That is so awesome. I don't know that I ever heard of a life coach until maybe just a few years ago. So how did you even know to get hooked up with one?
That's a great question. This was 6 years ago for me.
Okay.
And I think I ran into a few people at dinner parties or just when I was out and about. And a few people had started studying life coaching. And they weren't very deep into it, though. It's kind of like they were taking courses, but they hadn't quit their day jobs.
Mm-hmm.
And then one woman in my community did start a business as a life coach. And she invited me to an evening where she was basically just launching her business. She was just promoting and talking a little bit about what life coaching could mean to people. And I was at that event, and she launched a group. It was a weight loss group, and I joined. So it was that experience. It was meeting a few people that kind of put it on my radar, and then actually reaching out for help myself, and then just realizing that this was a whole new world.
I don't think I ever knew what a life coach was either until I started listening to your podcast. And I've been listening.
My podcast?
Yes. And I think I've been listening for about 6 months pretty regularly now. And it has really been mind-blowing that you can change the way you think about things. And that just doesn't come naturally to me. So I've really appreciated some of the tools that you've given me. So I'm really excited to get into this today.
You know all my stupid stories already.
I do, but I love them, and I want other people to know
I want to hear all of the stupid stories.
One of the things I appreciate about Suzy is her great enthusiasm for midlife, and I'm excited to get to share her perspective with listeners today. I don't know that I've ever listened to somebody so excited about midlife.
Really?
No.
You know what? You're right. A lot of people are very negative about it.
Well, one of the first topics that caught my eye when I first listened to Women in the Middle is how to regret-proof your life. And midlife is a time when we start to reflect on our choices and think about what might be possible in the future. And I think living without regrets is something that most women are interested in. One of the things I wanted to get started with is, what do you think a midlife crisis looks like for women? Like, we see the stereotypes for men of the little red sports car and they leave their wife for a younger woman, but what does it look like for women that you work with? Because I don't think there's quite as many stereotypes.
So midlife crisis is really what I see with my clients is really when we start to feel that something's off. So with me, I noticed I wasn't content at work anymore. That's how I noticed it.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't even understand that when it happened. But I started to feel bored. And then I'm like, something's off. This isn't like me, because I am upbeat. I am positive, and overall, I liked my job.
Mm-hmm.
But what I was starting to feel was, I think there's something more out there for me. So I kind of think it's like we're a little agitated, that we're out of alignment.
Mm-hmm.
So there's some kind of a disconnect between where we thought we would be when we thought about getting older and where we are. So sometimes it's a job, sometimes it's relationships, sometimes it's trips that you thought you would take. Whatever it is, some beautiful combination of purpose and core values and where you are. And then there's this other overarching thing going on behind the scenes, is this aging. Maybe I'm running out of time. I remember when my grandmother was this age. You start to just be more aware of that kind of thing. One of the other things I noticed, other than work and being like, ooh, I think there's something more out there for me, I actually thought I would be an entrepreneur, and I wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
So I was 27 years into my career. I was turning 50, and I'm like, hey, what happened here? I'm a union employee.
Knock at the door was extremely timely for you. If you were already having these thoughts, it just completely lined up. I know that it's really hard to see being let go as a gift, but I love that you talk about that now, because sometimes those hard knocks in life, you don't get the thing you wanted. The answer isn't yes to something that you've asked or prayed for. And then it can just be the best gift ever. So I'm loving your enthusiasm as well as you talk about this.
Oh, I didn't think it was a gift right away.
No, right, of course not at all. Yes.
In fact, when I drove home, I remember that drive. I remember calling one girlfriend I would always talk to about work things. And I remember saying to her, I think this is a gift.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But I couldn't embrace it yet, because it was very painful. It's very harsh.
It's about like we want to be able to have control, or a sense of control is how I'll put it. And we want to be able to choose those things. But do you think you would have ever chosen this line of work had you not been forced out of your current comfortable situation?
That is a great question. And I think about that all the time. I'm not even sure when I would have had the courage to leave the job.
Yeah.
Because the thought I kept having in those 5 years was, it's indulgent for me to change when I have something that's so good on paper and I don't have a strong desire yet to do something else. So I wasn't completely clear about my path. So I think I would have eventually, but it would have taken me longer. And what I've noticed about life coaching is that it can really speed up the process.
Mm-hmm.
It really can, because you're being challenged on your thoughts. You're being challenged on thinking about the future. And a lot of us don't challenge ourselves that much that way.
Mm-hmm.
We believe our excuses. We believe our thoughts that keep us small, that keep us safe. It's just easier. It requires less energy, less risk.
Well, and I think you probably, even though you were not happy in your job, it was safe. That was the safe place to stay.
It was safe. It was a good job. It was cause oriented. I had great benefits. I worked with nice people. That wasn't the problem.
Mm-hmm.
I was bored. I was bored. I'd just been at that good job too long.
Right. Well, what do you think that women who are in their 40s can do to start to regret-proof their lives? Like, what are some practical steps we can take? Because I know that as your kids get into high school, you spend a lot of time getting ready to launch them and what are they going to do next? But how do we start to regret-proof our own lives?
The very first thing we need to do is think about how to think.
I'm taking notes.
It's so hard to think.
The thinking is the hardest thing.
I know.
Yeah.
I don't like to think.
Thinking is very hard. But here's the thing, and I actually had a client say this to me yesterday. She gave herself the space to think.
Mm.
And that's what's required. Because if you, like, first of all, you need to understand you need to think.
Mhm.
But if we stay in our work-a-day, busy, chaos, obligation, putting everybody else first, it takes
Right.
time to think. It really does take time. So I do some really good thinking in the shower,
Mhm.
but I also do some good thinking when I'm walking.
Mhm.
I do amazing thinking when I'm anywhere near water. And so it's kind of like you can't expect to sort it all out in a weekend or on a walk. But
Right.
if you have thinking on your agenda and noticing your thinking, if you are like that for some time consistently, you'll be amazed at what you think.
Mhm.
Right.
And so it's really thinking about what you want in the future.
And that can be
Most
really
of us-
uncomfortable. Like a lot of times we want to fill
Yeah.
up that space so that we don't have to think.
Yeah, thinking can be scary.
Thinking can be scary. But I'd like to offer you that that's a thought about thinking that may not serve you.
I know. But I realize that for me, and I know one of your phrases is stinky thinking. That
Yeah.
comes naturally for me. And I think part of the battle of the mind is first recognizing how you think. I may be thinking too much, but it's how am I thinking? If it's negative, if it's not helping me,
Right.
then that's not good.
Well, then what's important to notice is that you have options. So what I really do recommend is first to be aware of your thoughts. So give yourself that time to think and be aware of what you're thinking. It's a really good idea to write this stuff down because most of us don't remember things,
Mhm.
especially when we're not used to it, right? So this is a new skill. You could take voice notes, you could write notes on your phone, you could do the old-fashioned way and keep a little diary or a little tiny notebook in your purse. Maybe you have a morning routine where it's a good idea. We call it a thought download, where you just give yourself a little bit of time to get it out and write it down. And then you look at what you're thinking. Then you're going to look at your thoughts and you're going to go, ooh, that's curious. Look at what I'm thinking. I didn't know I wanted that. I didn't know I was afraid of that. And then after a while, you'll see patterns in what keeps coming up for you. And then you can notice that and ask yourself more questions. So the shift is really to allow yourself to think, to take note of what you're thinking, to remember that watching your thoughts is what it's all about. And then you notice what's a thought and what is a fact in your life. And then once we see the thoughts, we can start to notice what they're creating for us, how they make us feel. So you start to see when I think I'm too old, it makes me feel sad. Or when I think that I have fewer possibilities out there in my life now than I did when I was 35, that makes me feel hopeless. So you start to look at the thoughts you're thinking and how they're making you feel. And then you decide if you like the reasons for thinking those thoughts. Ask yourself, why am I thinking that? What am I making that mean? Be curious about what's going on in your brain. Just because it's going on up there doesn't mean it's so.
I love this so much. And it's so wild because I've had two thoughts as you were talking, Suzy. And the first was I really had a lot of fear when it came to my oldest son. He was taking a summer school course, and I noticed that anytime I thought about it, I got really anxious. So I started thinking about, like, why am I, so anxious about this? Or why does this just, make me feel sick inside whenever I think about this particular situation? And I thought, well, because I'm afraid he's going to somehow fail at life in the greater grand scheme of things. I'm concerned about this summer school course because I think he is not going to be a good, citizen of the United States and be able to provide for himself. Like your mom mind goes like years down the road. I told myself, I'm like, this is ridiculous. I told Grant, I said, you need to come over here and sit down. And I told him, I said, look, every time I think about this situation, it makes me mad. And I'm mad because I'm afraid. And I'm afraid because of this. I am choosing to not be afraid anymore. This is your thing. This is your life. And I have to really pray and allow God to lead you in your life. And I really had to let go. I love that you said this because my summer has been a lot more free. He has not done what I have wanted him to when I thought he should do it, but I haven't been worried about it anymore.
My mentor, Brooke Castillo, she says worry pretends to be necessary.
Ugh,
Right.
Yeah.
And really, and I love how you explained that you connected with your feelings. It's
Yeah.
really important to understand that our thoughts create feelings.
Mhm.
So some of us are more able to access our feelings. Some of
Okay.
us are more able to access our thoughts. But once you know that they're connected,
Connect.
you are really on to yourself.
Some verses come to mind about taking every thought captive and transforming by renewing your mind, and another verse saying whatever's pure and true and honorable and just, dwell on these things. In other words, we have to be intentional about our thoughts. We have to change our thoughts. That's what renewing our mind is, and taking captive those stinky thoughts. And I love, Suzy, that you say we have to supervise our thoughts. That
Yes.
your brain, I love that phrase, that your brain doesn't just think these things on its own if it's out of practice. You have to practice this. At least some of us do.
Yeah, I think most of us do. I call thinking on purpose, right? So you have to supervise, see what's going on up there, and see if it's producing the feelings and the behavior and the results in your life that serve you, that you want. And if it doesn't, then you have some work to do. And supervising means just what we were talking about. It means being aware, writing it down, really noticing it, checking in with your body and seeing how that vibration feels. How is this thought making me feel? And then what happens is everything we do in the world is based on how we feel or how we think it will make us feel. So your behavior is directly related to that feeling that you're experiencing. And after you do something, you create results in your life.
Well, when you talk to women that do say that they're feeling bored or unhappy or they want to make changes, what are some of the common excuses that you see as to why they don't actually move in the direction of change?
Oh, it's too scary. I'm too old. It'll never work. What will people think of me? That kind of stuff. What if I
Right.
fail and I haven't lost weight yet?
Yeah.
Right?
Mhm.
I don't look the way I want to look yet. I'm not
Yeah.
smart enough. All those things. More stinky thoughts. More stinky thoughts. So what we can do about them is recognize them for what they are. It's a thought. And what's it doing? It's creating fear or hesitation or
Mhm.
sadness or feeling less than. What do you do when you feel like that? You stay small. You retreat, typically, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
We like to say you go back to the cave.
Right.
Because
Right.
things,
Right.
when you're afraid, you go back to bed, you pull the covers over your head. So what does inaction look like for you? It might be procrastination, whatever. And then the result is that you don't change, which proves your thought, I'm afraid to change, it's too hard, something like that. So the results that we have in our life always prove our thinking, which is so interesting. It's
Mhm.
scary on the one hand, but it's so
Mhm.
empowering on the other because your thoughts are optional. With supervision, with building that skill of recognizing your thoughts and understanding that your thoughts are part of creating what it is in your life that you like and that you don't like, and that you've got responsibility for all of it when it comes to your emotional well-being.
I'm just thinking so much about, different situations where some of my other children, I've seen them not pursue something out of fear. We can pass worry to our children. I've seen that happen before. But can we pass on the skill set of, taking these thoughts captive and trying to overcome, our emotions and our feelings to get different results? Any mom would want her kids to be able to succeed and not live in fear and not think small, so they're staying small. You know what I mean? So what can we do as parents to try to work on this with our children while we're also trying to work on it in our own lives?
It's such a good question. And if this kind of stuff was taught earlier on, we would have saved ourselves so much pain and frustration.
Oh, I
Right.
know.
So, yes, it is a skill.
Mhm.
Becoming connected and aware of what you're thinking, you can get better at. And then understanding that these thoughts create feelings and you can do something about how you're feeling. It's a massive eye opener for most people.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So the way you just ask your kids, what are you thinking and why? Why do you think that?
Mm-hmm.
Get them talking more about thoughts
Right.
and noticing how thoughts make them feel. That's a great place to start. Awareness is really where we need to start, because once we understand where we're at, then we can think about the future and where we want to be.
Yeah, I think just being able to put this into practice ourselves will make it come more naturally to talk to our kids. Because I have a kid that I think struggles with this same thought pattern that I have, where he's fearful and negative. And for me, I've thought that way my whole life. And when I married my husband, I mean, if you know him, he thinks just the opposite of me. He sees the best in everything. He sees the positive. He says, don't think about the way you wish it would be. Think about the way it is and deal with it. Be in the here and now and how things really are. And so I just took from that, well, that's just the way he is, and this is just the way I am. And have realized just recently that I can change that. That I don't have to be stuck. This is just not the way you are, that you have to be. So that's what I want to help my son with.
Yeah, that's a great observation. And you're right. Being stuck is a choice. That's really what I've come to believe. That when you feel stuck, you might say, I just don't know what to do. I'm so confused. And I said that for 5 years. I whined to my friends about how stuck I am. But even thinking about being stuck that way felt like a fact to me. It felt like this is just the way it is. It's like right now I'm stuck, and I'm stuck with being stuck.
Did your husband say it would be okay for you to leave your job? You probably talked about this with him. Was he supportive of you trying something new? It doesn't sound like it was a situation of, well, I can't leave because I need this money or we won't be able to pay our bills. What kind of a stuck was it for you?
It was all focused on, he was supportive, but I just felt so responsible. And my main feeling, other than fear, was it feels indulgent if I can't guarantee success. I was very hung up on replacing my income.
Mm-hmm.
And it never occurred to me that I could blow past my income. I was just very focused on replacing my income.
Right.
And it felt indulgent not to have a solid plan. And at that point, I didn't have a solid plan. That was all coming from me. There was no outside pressure one way or the other. Transitioning into a murky unknown was something I was very uncomfortable with, even though now what I've seen is that it does take time to find your path, and allowing yourself the time to experiment with thoughts, to meet new people, to try different things on for size is part of a beautiful process, a gift that you can give yourself. You don't always know everything at the front end. We all know that about life, right? It's impossible to know everything. But what you can do is believe in yourself. Yeah. And at that point in my life, I didn't have a strong belief in my ability to do anything other than what I was doing.
Well, I think after 27 years, I think it's hard for people to think they can do anything else. I think that's just natural.
Right.
We've done something for years and years and years, and it's hard to think that, oh, well, I could be a different way. Even you with your thinking, Julie, comparing yourself to John, I mean, you probably initially think, well, I can't think any way different.
That's a really great point. And it's the way you're thinking about change is also keeping us stuck, right? So the way I was thinking about it, the way you're thinking about it, like your husband, I'm just not that way. Well, could you be open to being that way? Could you learn to be more that way? I'll give you an example, the way I thought about technology, and it's just ironic that we had a tech glitch at the beginning of the call, because technology is something that I had a big hang up about. And it turns out that as an online business owner, it's something that you really need to have dialed in at some level. When I was working for somebody else, I had an IT department, and I had editors, and I had managers, and I had colleagues at the ready to help me, right? And here, I'm a home dweller. I'm by myself. It's me and my dog and my bird, and that's it. And I don't think she's going to be helpful if I ask her how to make Skype work.
Right.
So what happened to me very early on was, as part of my training, I was in this master coach training class, and we needed to do a final project. And I decided to do these series of 3 webinars. I didn't even know what a webinar was, and I certainly didn't know how to do it. And it was very scary to me. And so I realized that the thought I had was, I suck at technology. And when I thought that thought, I felt ignorant And when I felt ignorant, I procrastinated. And the result was that I didn't end up taking any steps toward completing the webinar series, which basically proved the thought that I sucked at technology because it got in the way of my being successful. And I'm like, but wait, I don't know how to run the webinar. It is a fact. I don't know what I'm doing.
Right.
And my coach was like, but it's the way you're thinking about the webinar that's getting in the way. It's not serving you. I could not understand that it was the way I was thinking about it that was creating my result, not the amount of knowledge I had. So I toyed with a bunch of thoughts, and what I settled on has been a thought that's really helped me. And anybody who's listening can try this little phrase, and it will really help you too. Build a little bridge to the thoughts you know you want to think and need to think, but aren't there yet. It didn't feel natural for me to think I'm a rock star at technology, but it did feel natural for me to think I'm learning to manage the technology I need for my business. I'm learning.
Mm-hmm.
So as soon as I think I'm learning, I lean in and I feel more open to trying things. I feel more compassionate about where I'm at in the process. When I think I suck, I pull back. I'm like, ugh, hands off. I don't know what I'm doing. It's never going to work. I'm too old. I can't believe I have to do this. Help, right? So that learning has helped me in so many ways because what you really need to do is lean in and start taking action that will help. And I know I could figure it out. I didn't believe it with the other thought. But when I think I'm learning, I'm reminded that I have a proven track record of learning things.
Right.
So
I really appreciate that thought because I've always been a little resistant to kind of pop psychology when it says you can do anything that you believe you can do, or because there's a lot of steps missing there.
Yes.
Or just I think this will happen. Like if I believe it or think it, it will be true. And you may be saying the same thing, but you're giving all the steps in between. That okay, you admit I didn't know anything about this technology, but I can learn. And what's one thing I could do to make learning easier this week? That you have to start taking those steps.
Absolutely. I catch myself thinking I suck at technology all the time. And when I couldn't get on Skype this morning, it popped into my head.
I think you even said it.
I suck at technology. And then I'm like, wait, stop.
Where's my bridge?
I'm learning. Right. And another bridge thought that's a really great thing to remember is the little phrase, I'm open to the idea. So if you could just be open to the idea that you could master this technology, or that you could take one step, that you could learn one thing, that you know how to consult Google, you know how to consult a friend, you can pick up the phone, you can send somebody a text, you can ask in a group. It's so different than just not taking responsibility. It's really you taking responsibility for the results in your life, from everything from your attitude about bigger things to your day-to-day. And so that is supervising your thinking. The thoughts might still pop in, but you don't need to be at the effect of the stinky thinking. Right. You can notice it. You can be curious about it. Oh, look, I've been doing so well with managing my thoughts about technology, but the minute I have a problem with Skype, there's that thought again. Aren't I funny? What can I do about it?
Yeah.
I love this discussion about thoughts because we did another podcast where I talk about losing 60 pounds twice. The second time I lost weight, I did it the right way. But one thing that I tell a lot of people is that I had to change the way I talk to myself because I noticed that I am meaner to myself than anybody would ever be to me. I would get to the end of the day and I would make myself, I had to be intentional about it. I would recount the things out loud that I did well, all the good choices, and I would tell myself, celebrate those things. Teaching myself to speak nicely to myself, because when you talk nice to yourself, you tend to react more nicely to others and to yourself. You really get into a negative tailspin when you're just, you're like, oh, I can't believe you did that wrong. You're terrible at that and you made that horrible choice, and we wallow in it instead of, if we can be like, okay, you know what? I made a bad choice. It was a bad choice. Let's let it go. Okay, now I'm in a new moment. What am I going to do?
Absolutely. And even I'm learning to make better choices every day.
Yes.
I'm learning to make better choices. So to really notice how what you're thinking makes you feel and be aware of it and just decide if it serves you or not. And if it doesn't, you can create another thought and practice it on purpose.
Right.
Yeah, you do have to be really intentional about it. Otherwise another decade goes by.
Right.
Like that, right? We know
right.
that.
It does. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one reason I think it's so important to get a handle on this now, because we are more sensitive to time right now. We're more aware of it.
Mhm.
And time flies. And so why waste another minute not capitalizing on ways that we can be more intentional about our lives?
When we see our kids listening to negative thoughts or self-talk that's bad about themselves, their body image, or their whatever that they don't like about themselves, we say, stop it. Don't listen to that. Don't believe that. But then we're perfectly willing to believe those things about ourselves. We recognize that in others pretty easily.
It's true.
But
Mhm.
we're willing to believe all that and listen to that in our own heads.
Yes. And, I love that you brought up how mean you were to yourself in your mind,
Yes.
because you
Mhm.
would never speak like that to
No.
a niece, a nephew, a child, your
And
mother.
if anyone tried
Even
to
a
talk to
friend.
me like that, I'd want to slap them. I mean,
Mhm.
I would not stand for somebody speaking to me the way I spoke to myself.
Yeah.
Right. So you noticed it, which is amazing. It's amazing that you noticed it and you're supervising your thinking now. Well done.
Suzy, thinking about the passage of time, I think you might have had a whole podcast on this, but you mentioned a survey that people took on their deathbeds. When they were asked if they had any regrets, there were 5 that seemed to stand out. And so they were not living true to yourself, didn't maintain friendships, worked too much, didn't express feelings, didn't let myself be happier. Julie, I think you were in particular identifying with one.
Well, the ones that I think were really important to me were didn't maintain friendships. Like, I know that's something I want to be really intentional about. And then the last one, didn't let myself be happier. I would say I struggle with that one the most, probably.
Yeah, that one just makes me want to cry. Yeah, that work was done by a woman named Ware, and she started working in palliative, and she had the opportunity to talk to people on their deathbeds. And they talked about regrets, and she was able to categorize them into 5 distinct categories. She started a blog about it, and it got really popular, and she actually wrote a book. So you can put that link in the show notes for sure. Yeah, and I know that I wish I let myself be happier. That one just, that is such a common thing that people regret. So when we do think about regret proofing, I just like to think about it as doing everything possible to make sure that we don't have regrets. And these 5 key areas are super, super common. That other one that you mentioned about friendships, that comes up with my clients all the time. And I didn't recognize that when I started working with midlife women, but that so many women do not have the relationships that they thought they would have at this point in their life, at age and stage. So for many of them, they may have friends, but the friends aren't the type of friends that they're kind of like they're not at the same place right now. So sometimes you're all ready for personal growth, but you're in a community that's not at the same place, or that you want different things. And then also, people move, people get divorced, empty nest happens. It really shakes things up.
Mm-hmm.
And also when you don't have those communities, those natural communities of where our kids grew up and where our kids went to school, where we're just forced into social situations and we have these friend groups, they may or may not be what we need 10 years later, right? So it's definitely something that comes up all the time with my clients. And we work on thinking about all the relationships in our lives, the inner circle relationships, partners, our children, our parents, our siblings, that kind of inner circle. We also talk about acquaintances and friends, and also our community, and where we can seek more connection in our community. It could be church, it could be soccer, it could be needlepoint. It doesn't matter what it is. It's just, where are you connecting? I know I end up with a lot of connection related to my dog. I have a big Newfoundland. He's a showstopper.
Wow.
We talk to people all the time because of him. And it really, I told my husband he's turned into a chick magnet, because the dog is so handsome. The dog brings all the ladies. It's so funny. But just to think about relationships in your life and being intentional about them is something most of us don't think about that much. one of my clients was talking about the neighbor. So she's in this neighborhood and she noticed after we did this work that when she parked her car and closed the door, that there was a neighbor outside and she noticed herself thinking, I'm too busy to talk to that person. And she scurried inside. And certainly I'm in Toronto. It's cold in the winter. Our neighbors always joke that we don't see each other for like 6 months because people are scurrying to get out of the cold. So just noticing that you have a thought that you're too busy to say hello, or you're too busy to just connect in a light way is something just to be aware of. What's going on in your head that is making you feel resistant to those connections? And do you like your reasons? Believe me, you could do whatever you want. In coaching, we're supportive of you doing whatever you want in your life, but you just want to like your reasons and be aware of what it is that you do want and not just act on autopilot.
A lot of these things are things that we could do something about. You know, they didn't say, oh, I really regret not visiting 18 countries, or I really regret that I didn't achieve this pinnacle. It was more things that they could have done something about: expressing your feelings, maintaining relationships, being true to yourself. Why do you think that people don't let themselves be happier?
Why do you think? Why do you think people don't let themselves be happier?
I usually blame it just on my own personal personality. Like maybe I'm afraid the other shoe's going to drop if I get too happy about this one thing, but I don't know if that's true for other people.
Well, that's a thought. You know, there's all kinds of reasons that people don't allow it. Sometimes it's too scary. They have to be too vulnerable. They don't think they deserve it. Like right now, you're all thinking about one thing that would make you happy, right? Mm-hmm. And so you think, do I have that enough in my life or not?
I feel like mine's dependent on the people that are in my home. Like I can be happy if everybody's happy, but I'm sad if everybody's sad, or if one person is sad.
Oh, that's so interesting, because our feelings come from our thoughts. The way you're thinking about it is that your feelings are coming from facts, like just circumstances in your life. That is the big leap, right? Mm-hmm. Is to understand that you can feel happier because you're thinking thoughts that create happiness for you and not relying on other people or situations to make you happy. But in terms of the way this category is, I wish I let myself be happier. We have to just think, well, what is it that I want? One thing I always think about is a screen porch. I really want a screen porch. Now, I know the screen porch itself isn't going to make me happy, but right away, I have this image of being outside more in the safety of a screen porch and hearing the sounds and smelling the smells. And when I think about hearing the sounds of the birds and smelling the smells and hearing the wind, I just feel calmer. And what that means to me is I just need to be outside more. You know, I don't know if I'll end up with a screen porch. I would have to renovate a bathroom and do a few things before a screen porch ever came to the top of the list.
Right.
But it's really like, what do I want? I want to be outside more in my life. And right now I live in a place where it's cold 5 months of the year, 6 months iffy, 3 months horrible. And I'm very affected by that. Right. So it just makes you think. So if you're not even aware of what would make you happier, you know, then it's never going to happen. But you have to really think, what do I want? Is it a career that's in alignment with my core values? Is it to have a dog? Is it to travel? Is it to have more friends? Is it to have a lake house? Like, who knows what it is? Is it to have a beautiful garden? Is it to learn a skill that you don't have? Finally play piano. Like, what is it and why don't you have it now? Really good information there.
I love that. And I feel like that goes back to giving ourselves the time and the space to think, because I feel like we can just go through life on autopilot, especially in the middle years. There's so much happening. It's ironic because I actually pulled out my wedding dress for my daughter yesterday, and she's only 19, but we both tried it on and took pictures, and I hadn't pulled it out since I got married 22 years ago. And I also pulled out my wedding album, and in the front of it, my husband and I taped, we used to dream essentially on the back of the Steak and Shake paper, napkin at the table, the placemat. We would turn it over and we would draw pictures like where we want to be in 5 years. And we had all these dreams. And it's so wild because now it's like we're just trying to, get this kid through college and get him into a college. And it's like there's no time or space to really dream or think. And I think, well, what would I draw on the back of a Steak and Shake paper placemat right now? And I don't know.
I love that. And that's where a vision board can be handy. I developed this little product, this little program. We're talking about midlife, and I totally had a midlife moment.
That's perfect.
It's called Kickstart 50.
Oh, yes. That's
Okay.
a great name.
But it's basically, I call it a happiness board. The idea is to give yourself prompts to really think about your future. And it's easier for a lot of people to start with visual things. It's a kit that I put together, and it's some webinars. But the idea is to have reminders of what it is you want and encourage yourself to create the space and start to think. So if you and your husband are out to dinner, grab that napkin and have the conversation and start asking yourself the question, if I knew what I wanted to do in 5 years, what would it be?
Right.
Versus, I just don't even know what I want. There are two, like one is a question that's going to help you start to think. And the other one is basically, I don't know, which is going to create confusion, which is going to basically keep you stuck and not be inspiring.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
This kind of reminds me of a little exercise that you recommended people do if they feel like something might be missing in their life and they don't know what it is. You recommended that they divide their life up into chapters and then ask yourself, what was it that brought you joy or made you happy in each of those phases? And I actually did that. That was really a fun exercise to see if I was still incorporating some of those things in my life that I've always enjoyed.
I'm so glad you brought that up, and I'm tickled that it hit you like to that extent. Yeah, this is amazing little strategy that everybody can do. So you basically just look for moments of joy throughout your life versus looking for moments of trauma or stress or depression or chaos, which is what we normally do. And we let those things define us. And my clients have had such breakthroughs and remembered things that they had, it wasn't on their radar at all. So, for example, when I did it, I remembered tap dancing. So I had this little phase of tap dancing for 2 years with my best friend in grade 7 and 8. And I loved it. I didn't love performing. I didn't love the costumes, but I loved the tap and I loved the music and I loved the sound and I loved using my legs. And I loved that it was a form of dance that I didn't need to get my whole body into to the same degree as like jazz or something like that. So I totally forgot this. And the reason I totally forgot it was probably because my father died tragically during that same time period. She helped me remember it. And then that started me thinking, well, is that something that would be interesting to add back into my life now in my 50s?
Mm-hmm.
And first I went, that's too crazy. It's too scary. I'll have to tap in front of other people. I'm too old. I might fall. I'll look stupid. I would have to go buy tap shoes, like all of it. It just was like, this is not happening, right? But I couldn't get it out of my mind. And then it turned out that a local mom that I knew from when the kids went to school had a tap class for adults.
Really?
No kidding.
Right in my neighborhood. She's like a mile away. So that was really funny. But I've had clients remember all kinds of things. I've had clients remember how much they love to write. I've had clients remember the first time they rode a horse. Somebody was talking about mud pies. And it's not that you want to start making mud pies again, but maybe there was something about using your hands in a creative way that's missing. Maybe it's pottery. Maybe it's jewelry making. Maybe it's painting. Maybe it's sculpting. Who knows? But the point, maybe it's baking, right? But the thing is to notice when I made mud pies when I was 7, I had a fort. And I had a best friend, and I loved to bake them in the sun, and I loved to have my transistor radio, and whatever comes to mind when you did that. Another thing I really, really loved was marching band. So why did I love marching band so much? What did I make it mean? Why did it spark joy? And so what happens, as all of you guys have just talked about, is we get so busy with the chaotic swirl of life and obligation and mortgage and kids and empty nest and launching them and helping them and adjusting to parenting young adults and like everything, that we don't give ourselves time to think. And so these moments of joy are just waiting for us as clues in our past but it's not on our radar. So then we start to think, well, what do I want? And we don't have a clue.
Right.
And I believe the clues are in your past, your childhood, and whatever sparked joy then is highly likely to spark joy again.
It's so ironic because my husband and I we've made a major move a year ago, and then just 2 weeks ago we moved into a new home in Pennsylvania. And so we were just having this discussion about where we see our lives going, and if we could do anything we wanted to do, what would it be? And just kind of having those dreamlike discussions again. If we didn't have to work, what would we do? And things like that. And so we were actually walking the neighborhood and ran into a bunch of new neighbors. And so we were standing around talking to all of our new neighbors. And when we came back from that, we were sitting on our deck and we were just saying, well, this makes those people happy. And this particular event makes those people happy. And you can kind of see it in where people put their money and what they spend their time doing and how excited they get talking about a particular event. And so my husband and I were like, those aren't really the things, that maybe make us happy. The reason I'm saying this is because you can't borrow somebody else's happiness for an object or a thing or an adventure or anything. It really has to be personal. You can't look at your neighbor. You can't talk to a friend. You really have to look inside yourself to determine what is it.
Yes, definitely. It's just asking yourself more questions. What do I long for? What do I remember fondly? And then just asking yourself why. You can also use the same kind of exercise to think about jobs. If there was a job where there was something about it that brought a lot of joy or brought a lot of fulfillment, you can isolate what it was. And it may not have had anything to do with your job title, but it may have been an opportunity or the way that you were able to lead a certain project or the way you got some training or a particular manager or director who made a huge impact in your life. So it gets you just to start thinking about what are the things you're looking for that would add to your life. So I love this napkin idea. I think everybody should go get a napkin and fill it up with thoughts about your amazing future.
Something that you talk about that kind of dovetails with this is you say that women in the middle should have a passion project, that it's good for us. And what do you mean by that?
We all need something we love. And what I mean by that is something where when you do it, you kind of lose yourself in it. Mm-hmm. You lose sense of time. You're not really aware of time passing because you're so immersed and engaged. One of the reasons this is really important, I believe, is because it's just so good to feel that way, to love what you're doing, to feel turned on and excited by immersing yourself in a task or a thought or a project. So that's one reason. And the other reason is that in today's society, focusing on anything is not happening. Like we're so multitask oriented that deep focus is a skill. I've read a little about it that, kids growing up now don't have the skill that we developed as kids of deep focus and being able to concentrate. And it's really a chance to do that. So I lose myself in beads and wire.
Okay. Yes.
It gives me an excuse to buy beads. I love looking for beads on vacation. That's one of my favorite things to do is to find a bead store, and then I tell I have a little Etsy store, and I tell the story of the bead if it came from a vacation and something really fun. But that's really why. It's because you can immerse yourself, you can lose track of time. And the other thing I really like about it is that it becomes your personal brand. So it becomes something that you really value, and then it becomes easier often to allow yourself to enjoy it. Mm-hmm. So I have one friend talk to me about baking. That was her passion project. So it doesn't need to be something that you create that's just kind of, I'm going to go do this and then it has an end point. It could just be something that you love doing. So with her, she loves baking. She doesn't just love to bake for her family. She loves to bake and donate. She loves to talk to people about baking. She loves to buy recipe books. She loves to take cooking courses. So that all just comes together for her as something in her life that just brings her a lot of joy. So I think for all those reasons, it's amazing to have something that's just really important to you and almost feels like your right arm, right? Mm-hmm. I can't imagine not beating. Whatever it is for you, there's no right or wrong answer, but it's great to have something that you absolutely love and you allow yourself to enjoy.
Well, it can be something really simple. Like I've discovered tea. I love tea.
Yes.
And now it's fun when I go on vacation to try to find a new tea, or I look for little teacups in antique stores. That's kind of my thing to buy and pick up now. And so that's not something that I'm, trying to make money off of or be successful at. It's just something to enjoy.
I love that example too. And then to kick that up a notch, you could create a space where you really enjoy to drink your tea. Like maybe there's a cozy blanket there, or a particularly good chair or pillow, the mugs that you love. Yeah, I love that. That's a beautiful, beautiful example that you're kind of taking it to the next. Maybe you'll even learn how to make your own tea. Who knows where that will go, but you love it, you embrace it, and it's part of who you are. And I have to tell you, I got a crazy opportunity because of following my passion project of making these beads, making these beaded wire creations. I actually did that in the Jewish community, and I made these head coverings for Jewish women who wanted an artistic head covering. And in some situations, people are looking for these things, and I love wearing it in certain situations. And I made a few for myself, I made for my friends, and then I don't need 40 of them, so I opened up the little Etsy store. So then like a decade goes by, and the craziest thing happened in 2017 because Etsy is online, and I was contacted by a curator, an assistant curator at the Museum of Modern Art.
That's so cool.
Of all places. Like when I saw the email, I'm like, this has got to be a joke.
Is this a scam?
Right. A scam, or it's my kids. Like, I don't know. But I had to check everything to make sure it was real. And sure enough, there was an exhibit at the end of 2017, the beginning of 2018, called Items Is Fashion Modern. And MoMA purchased one of my pieces, and it was included in a 4-month exhibit at the Museum of Modern Art in New York. And it was shocking. I didn't believe it was happening the whole time it was happening. And it was the craziest thing. It's nothing I could have ever imagined. But what it came from was allowing myself to do what I loved. Mm-hmm. And it gave me an excuse to buy beads. And it gave me a great story. I did a few podcasts about it.
Yes.
It was a crazy, crazy experience. And if I wouldn't have done what I did for 10, 12 years, none of it would have happened.
Mm-hmm. And that was probably so satisfying for you to see that culmination kind of as just your passion project. And then it turned into that.
It was satisfying, but it was also surreal. Like, I still can't believe it happened.
Mm-hmm.
If you look up my name and MoMA, I'm listed as an artist at the MoMA.
Wow.
That's amazing.
I do feel a little bit like a fraud, but it was because it was an exhibit about fashion accessories over like 100 years. That's why it was included. It wasn't like they were looking for the new Monet or anything.
Well, beading is a form of art, though. Like you were doing an artistic venture there. So that's awesome.
I was. It was crazy, but it is a lesson to be learned that A, anything can happen in midlife. And B, it's important to do what you love. Absolutely.
Right. Well, this is so inspiring, Suzy. And I know that our listeners are going to really enjoy this. And would you let people know where they can find you?
Absolutely. Thanks so much. It's been so much fun. This group interview has really been a lot of fun. So you can find me in basically 2 places. You can go into podcast land. And if you're listening now, I know you're familiar with podcast land. So you can listen to the Women in the Middle podcast, which is available on iTunes and all the places, your favorite apps where you can access podcasts, including my website, which is at SuzyRosenstein.com. And I also have a free resource that you might be interested in that some of your listeners might want to grab. It's called 9 Secrets to Get Unstuck in Your 50s. You don't need to be in your 50s. You can be any age, but it's a lot of examples that are relevant to women in their 50s. And you can grab that at SuzyRosenstein.com/9 secrets.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Great.
Well, thank you for
Awesome.
sharing that. And I know that I've listened to several of your episodes that you talked about today. Like the episode about your dog is just great. I love it. And I did listen to your MoMA episode. If you want to go back and hear more behind the scenes of things that Suzy talked about, a lot of those are topics that she has delved into deeper on her podcast. Well, thank you so much for coming on today, Suzy. We really enjoyed it.
Thank you, Suzy.
It was a delight. It was a
So
delight.
fun.
Thanks so much for the opportunity.
We're so glad you joined us today. If you're a fan of Midlife Matters, please tell a friend and help them hit the free subscribe button on their favorite podcast app. We also hope that you'll follow us on Instagram at Midlife Matters Podcast. This is where you can see the things that we talk about on each episode, and we'd love the chance to get to know you better in the comments. You can also contact us at midlifematterspodcast@gmail.com. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next Wednesday.